Hi, and welcome to Northwest Brew Talk. I'm Mike Rizzo.
And I'm Michelle Rizzo.
And this is episode 21. Each week we promote the Washington brewing industry by talking to those involved and drinking Washington beer. With over 200 breweries, we try to highlight as many as possible every episode. On today's show, we will have an interview with Brigid Meintz from WSU, our brew news and views, and local music from Julia Massey.
If you have any comments or questions, send us an email to nwbrewtalk@gmail.com. We're on Twitter at nwbrewtalk and on Facebook at facebook.com/nwbrewtalk. If you like the show and want to support us, why not become a patron? With a donation, we offer everything from a mention on the show to a copy of our upcoming book, Washington Beer. Head over to nwbrewtalk.podbean.com for more details. To start the show, let's open our first beer.
That is right, and this is Hoppy Bitch IPA from Northwest Brewing Company.
Northwest Brewing Company opened in July of 2012 and is located in Pacific, Washington. Their tap room is open 7 days a week, and they do serve food, including pizza and pasta, and they have live music every Saturday night. Sounds like a fun place.
All right. This citrusy smelling.
Very citrusy.
Pretty dark golden here.
The Hoppy Bitch IPA is right from the website. We have the Northwest IPA is bold and balanced with rich malty flavor and a strong hop presence. They use premium 2-row Munich, Victory, and Crystal malts to perfect a base for showcasing Yakima-grown Columbus hops. After one sip, they think you'll agree. This is one hoppy bitch of a beer. And it's got a 6.3% ABV and 80 IBU. What do we think?
This one is a little different. This one has pretty good hoppy characteristic, but it's not super bitter going down. So it's a little different than some of them, and I do like my hoppy beers. So,
yes, you do.
Not too bad at all.
Good.
Nope. All right, and now on to our brew news and views.
This weekend, Friday, June 19th through Sunday, June 21st, is the Washington Brewers Festival, drawing the biggest crowd of Washington-only breweries. On May 30th, Specialty Competitions, LLC, held the state's third Washington Beer Awards. There were 716 entries from almost 110 breweries. 50 judges evaluated over 100 styles. On Saturday at the Washington Brewers Festival, the winners will be announced. We will bring you a recap of that next week. Go to WashingtonBeer.com for all the details on this weekend's Father's Day Festival. And to show that beer might be as good as an apple a day, a 110-year-old Nebraska man said that drinking 1 can of beer a day at 3 p.m. has contributed to his long life. Mark Behrens is the oldest man in Nebraska and continues his ritual to this day. What he did during Prohibition, we don't know. But if that's all it takes, we're on pace to live to be a ripe old age.
All right. Congratulations to that man. And Thrillist.com recently ran a story to see who has the best beer city in the United States. They looked at influence, number of breweries, history, impact, culture, and then they threw in their own opinion. At number 1, I'm sure we could probably guess who that is. That is Portland. Number 2 came out to be San Diego. Number 3 was Denver. Number 4 was Seattle.
Started to worry we weren't going to make it on there.
Yeah, I was wondering. Now, with neighborhoods that have more breweries than at least 10 states, you wonder why they didn't rank higher. Now, another study, not biased by humans, unless that means actual sales, Nielsen Scan Tracker released its 2014 figures. Based on the share of craft beer purchased in grocery stores compared to non-craft beer, Once again, Portland wins with 43.4% of beer purchases in dollar sales. But Seattle comes in second with 37.2% of beer purchases being craft beer. So Seattle is definitely up there. And again, with more breweries in Seattle than at least 10 states, they need to be a little higher on the rankings.
Anyone that loves a good craft beer knows that hops can be a key ingredient, especially in the hoppy IPAs everyone, or almost everyone, seems to love. The Seattle Times ran a story recently on how hop farms in eastern Washington are trying to meet the demand. Acreage grew 6% in 2014 and is projected to rise another 10% this year. That is not without a cost. It typically takes at least 5 years for hop plants to fill production. It is not a recession-proof business either. But while the iron is hot, farmers are going to try to meet the demand. That demand has led to rejuvenating rural communities and other farming sectors. Hop growers are also adjusting their plant breeding based on demand from brewers. Aroma hops are one of the fastest growing hop area. They provide the citrus and pine scent for many beers. Another aspect of barley farming, important in the malt aspect of brewing. Later in the show, we'll learn more about that with Brigid Meintz from WSU.
That's right. Pike Brewing Company recently launched its new Skagit Valley Alba, the first Washington State varietal beer made with 100% in-state ingredients. This is a big deal, as the new beer is the first in a new Pike locale series of like beers. The malt is sourced from Skagit Valley and Whitman County farms. The hops are from Yakima Valley, and it's honey from Snohomish County. The water is sourced from the Cedar River watershed, and they use Pike No. 1 yeast. Charles Finkel, Pike founder and president, said that Pike Locale Series is a revival of the, quote, pre-prohibition tradition of sourcing quality ingredients as close to the brewery as possible, unquote. Skagit Valley Malting is providing the new flavorful malt for the beer. Pike plans on using other heritage varieties of barley as they become available. Skagit Valley Alba is available on tap and in bottles. And that is the Brew News and Views this week.
Welcome back to Northwest Brew Talk. If you want to submit news to Northwest Brew Talk, send us an email to nwbrewtalk@gmail.com. Or if you've not yet subscribed to our podcast, why not do it now? It's free, available anywhere you listen to podcasts, including iTunes, Podbean, and Stitcher. If you like us, a review or rating would be really appreciated. But most importantly, make sure you tell your friends about Northwest Brew Talk.
That is right. And we're going to now talk with Brigid Meintz from WSU in Mount Vernon as we learn a little bit more about barley growing and malting.
My name is Brigid Meintz, and I'm a PhD student here at Washington State University, Mount Vernon, the Northwest Research and Extension Center. I'm studying under Dr. Stephen Jones, and I hopefully in the next couple of years will earn a PhD in crop science with a focus in plant breeding and genetics, working with barley for food and malt and dry beans.
So, tell me what interests you in this to get involved in this.
Sure. So I did my master's degree at Oregon State University, also in crop science with a focus in plant breeding and genetics. And I also worked in the barley breeding program there. So that's sort of where my interest started. And I worked on primarily food barley. And then here I've gotten to sort of expand that into malt for brewing and distilling. Barley is a pretty fun crop to work with. I guess I take it all the way from making the initial cross to come up with new varieties in the greenhouse, through trialing in the field, here at the station, to on-farm locations. And then I also get to hang out with some pretty cool maltsters and brewers and taste the malt and beer and whiskey that they're making. So it's a pretty fun crop to be involved with, and I enjoy each step of the process.
So what, after here after you graduate, what would be your goal?
Sure. So I guess sort of the point of getting a PhD for me was to continue in academia. So I would like to work at a university as a plant breeder. I'm interested both in research and extension and perhaps a little bit of teaching. I really like engaging with farmers in the community and all of the sort of processors. I love plant breeding itself, but I don't want to get stuck in the lab or in the field without seeing the end results of my research.
Okay. So what do you do here?
That differs daily. Some days I'll be in the greenhouse actually making the crosses. Right now the plants are drying down and I have a bunch of new F1, which is the generation, the first generation after the cross seed that I'll be planting.
And cross, you mean crossbreeding?
Yeah, so barley is a self-pollinating plant. So it's a traditional form of breeding. We emasculate one spike by removing the anthers before the pollen has escaped so that the plant effectively becomes female. And then we take pollen from another parent and fertilize the plant to create new and exciting lines. And, we might do that if we have one line that has really great malt quality, but does sort of poorly out in the field. And then another one that maybe has poor malt quality but does well out in the field. And so we'll cross the two of those and try and find a new line that combines the characters that we're looking for.
Okay. And what else could you be doing on a daily basis?
So right now I've been out in the field a lot. I grow both winter and spring barley, and so the winter barley is probably 6 weeks out from being harvested. So I've been taking disease notes. I have probably close to 2,000 different lines out in the field that I'm selecting for different things out of. And so I've been out there taking field notes. Some days I'll be in the lab running tests for farmers or for my own research. In the late August, when a lot of the farmers are harvesting their barley, they'll bring little samples in before they harvest the whole field for us to run some tests on protein and moisture and falling number, which measures pre-harvest sprouting. So that's one of the big concerns for maltsters in this area, is that because we tend to get rain late in the summer and early fall, a lot of the lines that have been bred for malting, the dormancy has been bred out of them because the maltsters want that barley to behave really evenly, and they don't want some grain having more dormancy than others, and they want to be able to use it immediately. But that's a problem out in the field because essentially if it rains on the crop and it doesn't have any dormancy, it can start sprouting in the field. And since malting is a germination process, if you get some of the barley germinating while it's still on the head in the field, that can cause really uneven modification and major problems with the malt. So we have a little machine that will measure the amount of pre-harvest sprouting, and so that can advise the farmers whether they can sell it as malt barley or if they have to sell it as feed barley.
Oh, okay. Which is probably a big difference in price.
Yes. Yeah. And then, other days I am a grad student, so I'll be taking classes, I'll be writing up papers. The really fun days are the ones where I get to go over to the maltsters or hang out with brewers and actually get to taste their products.
That you helped to work on.
Exactly. And then we also have the bread lab here, so Jonathan is our resident baker, and so he works mostly with wheat, but also with the other grains that we're working on here, barley and oats, and so he actually will take some of the malt and incorporate that into his baking. So I also get to taste bread. So I have a pretty ideal situation here.
Yeah. So what is barley used for other than just malt?
Sure. So the main use of barley is actually for feed for animals. And then what I've been working on is barley for food for human consumption. So only about 2% of the barley grown in the U.S. is grown for food, for people.
Right.
And so I'm doing my small part to try and increase production and consumption. And I guess I'm breeding new lines for food that do well in this climate and around the Pacific Northwest to help increase the production. And then I spend a lot of time just sort of telling people how awesome barley is and why they should eat it.
So what can you eat it? I mean, what can you make with barley?
Sure. So I guess my favorite way to eat it is just cooked up like rice. So you can find pearled barley pretty easily in the stores, but that most likely hasn't been bred for any sort of nutrition or flavor. It's most likely a feed barley that goes through the pearling process, which is a physical abrasion process that removes the hull. So there are two types. There's a hulled barley and a hulless barley, and that's a single gene that controls that difference. And the hulled barleys are typically used for feed and for malting because that hull provides a natural filtration during the brewing process. So if brewers are working with wheat, which is hullless, for example, they'll add in rice or oat hulls.
Okay.
But hullless barley is what I'm breeding for food because you don't have to go through that pearling process, because the pearling process, in addition to removing the hull, also removes the bran and the germ, which is where a lot of the minerals and micronutrients are located in the grain. And so it's no longer considered a whole grain. It is still good for you because sort of the main thing that I push on why barley is so good for you is that it has a soluble dietary fiber called beta-glucan, which is found primarily in oats and barley, and is the reason that the FDA approved a health claim for barley in 2006. So if you eat a certain amount of barley that has a certain amount of fiber in it, it can help, typical things, reduce your level, risk for heart disease, diabetes, obesity, etc. And that beta-glucan is actually found throughout the cell walls of the endosperm. And so that is the part of the pearled barley that does get kept. And so eating pearled barley is still good for you, but it's better if you eat the whole grain. And the hullless barley, you can't eat the whole grain because it free threshes like wheat does. And so I make it up like rice under stir fry. You can flake it like oats and have it as an oatmeal substitute. You can mill it in flour. Barley doesn't have the same level of gluten as wheat, so you can't actually bake a loaf of bread with 100% barley flour because it will rise and then sort of collapse. And I've seen it done, and it looks like a little brick. So not super appetizing, but you can make a pretty delicious loaf with about 40% barley flour. And I make a pretty tasty cookie with actually 100% barley flour because it doesn't have to rise, as well as barley flakes instead of oatmeal.
You like your barley?
I do. I love my barley. I guess my dream sort of is to breed a barley that can, to eat a meal and drink a beer that's made with the same barley.
Oh.
So
that's a goal down the road?
It is. And I definitely see it as a possibility.
Cool. So how many different varieties are you working on here?
Mm-hmm. So variety is a sort of tricky term.
Sure.
Because that implies that it's gone through a formal release process.
Okay.
I prefer to refer to them as accessions or breeding lines.
Okay.
I probably have somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 out in the field right now. And
how much? I mean, that's a lot. How much of each are you growing?
Sure. So I have a few different size plots. Sort of the main size is about 4 by 12 feet.
Okay.
So pretty small. And then I have some that are just a single row that are about 8 feet long. And so that depends on the stage of the breeding process.
Mm-hmm. So the bigger plots would be further along?
Yeah, and some of that has to do with you can pretty easily select out a single row, but it also has to do with the amount of seed that we have. So from a single cross in the greenhouse, we're going to get, like 100 grams maybe, and that doesn't go very far. And then as we increase that, we can do bigger plots. We do have some that we grow full strips of, so that's probably maybe 240 feet by 4 feet. And so we'll do that when it's even farther in the breeding process to show to people at field days. We might try and do a test malt batch. We want to have enough grain so that Jonathan and the bakery can maybe do some test bakes with it, that sort of thing.
So, going back to beer and malt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are you developing different ones based on requests? Is that how it's working?
So typically in the past, when you're breeding a malt barley, you have a number of very, very specific requirements that you have to meet, and those are set by AMBA, which is the American Malt Barley Association. And the reason that they have those specific requirements is that most of the large malting companies need their malt barley to be very standardized because they're going to be blending, and then they need everything to go through a 7-day cycle, and they need it all to respond at the same time to each of the processes. So that in the past, and in most breeding programs around the country, actually, is what breeders are aiming for. And so those different specifications include things like protein levels, both of the barley and then of the malt and wort, enzyme activity, the amount of starch available to convert to sugars, a number of other characteristics like that. And those are things that are still very important. But here we're actually working with Skagit Valley Malting. I don't know if you talked to them, but I recommend doing that.
Yeah, we haven't talked to them yet.
They're doing a pretty cool thing over in Burlington.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've developed a malt regimen that is much more flexible, given the size of their equipment and just their interest in malting unique things and developing unique flavors. And so the exciting thing about that is that because they're more interested in flavor and how that comes out in both the malt and the beer, we can give them things that would typically be rejected by AMBA.
Okay.
And so they're actually working with several lines that never would have been approved by AMBA. And they've adjusted their protocol so that some lines they malt in 4 days, some go as long as 12. And they can be flexible that way, and they can, they produce pretty delicious malt and pretty delicious beer. And so that's pretty exciting. And so that gives me as a breeder a lot more flexibility because I don't have to meet such strict requirements. And so I guess sort of the first place I'll start is how does it do for the farmer? That's really important. Even if it has terrific flavor, terrific malting profile, if it doesn't grow well here, then I don't see any point in pursuing it unless I'm using it as a parent in a cross. And so we work with some pretty wonderful farmers around this area. Most of them are not grain farmers primarily. They're in the bulb or potato or vegetable seed business, and they're looking for a rotation crop. And so they've found that growing grains every couple of years helps them break disease cycles, helps improve their soil fertility, and because they can sell now at a value-added price to a malting company, actually can bring in some money, which is pretty exciting. But if we give them barley that doesn't grow well, that doesn't work for them.
Right.
And so that's sort of the first step. And then, I've talked to Skagit Valley Malting and asked what characteristics they're interested in, and they are really interested in flavor. That's quite difficult to breed for, because at least in my experience, so for the OSU had a couple rice cookers, and I would cook up different varieties and have people taste them. And invariably, each person liked a different one better. And so, I would ask people to fill out little rating forms, and each of them got top marks, and each of them got bottom marks. Right. And so, as a breeder, that's tricky, but it also allows you a lot of possibilities, because maybe one person likes one thing and another person likes another thing, but as long as someone likes it, that works.
Well, it's kind of like beer. Not everybody likes the same one.
Exactly. Some people really like IPAs, and some people really like Miller Coors.
Yeah. And that goes to where the big maltsters have to have everything has to be done at a specific time,
because
so they can do
they're
these.
mostly selling to Anheuser-Busch and Miller Coors, and that's great. A lot of people drink those beers, but that's not the system that we're breeding for here. Sure. And so, flavor, and then I mentioned the enzyme activity, starch to sugars. Those are still obviously very important. But at Skagit Valley Malting, they're able to manipulate some of those things during the malting process.
Right.
So that helps. They're really interested in hulless barleys and colored barleys and things that typically never would be malted. So.
And those are for just some different characteristic in the malt?
Yeah, just looking for new and interesting things. They sort of want to stand out from the crowd, and that helps them do it.
Right.
So.
Right, I know they do their stuff is on demand, so they're not just making a bunch of barley and waiting for somebody to buy it.
Exactly. Yeah, as far as I know, they're sold out of everything they could make in the next couple of years already. Something to that effect. Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty exciting to be working with them, because they can, they'll take small samples. I mean, they can do about a 350-pound run on their little test malter, and so we can grow that much in a few strips.
Okay.
So that once we have enough seed and we're convinced that it'll do well for the farmers, we can give them that to do a test batch with.
Okay.
So they actually did that this last year. One of the other PhD students here, Brooke Brower, who's been working on barley for a couple of years, he selected a line that has now been released as variety called Richard, that was bred actually in Eastern Washington at Pullman and didn't do well in Eastern Washington, but it continuously did do well over here in Western Washington, and he identified that and selected it, and consequently got it released. And then Skagit Valley Malting did a test batch with it this last fall, I think, and really liked it. They really liked the malt, and they really liked the beer, and a lot of the people who've come through, I guess, have also really liked it. So that's pretty exciting. That's actually a feed barley that definitely was actually rejected by AMBA.
Oh, really?
So,
now, when you say it was released, what is that?
Yeah, so there's a variety release process which involves going through the university's technical transfer office, and it's sort of a formal procedure that you have to go through in order to get a variety out on the market for farmers.
So this is something then that farmers could buy?
Sure. So at this point, I think they're still going through a certification process to increase seed, increase clean, pure seed so that farmers can buy it. But I think hopefully that will go smoothly in the next couple of years, and then
that takes growing and
exactly. So this whole process, the breeding process itself, can take about 10 to 15 years.
So you can develop enough seed and everything.
Yeah, so we can select and purify and then increase. So it's a long process, but once it happens, it works pretty well.
Yeah, interesting. Now, did I read that there was an old 100-some-year-old variety that the doctor found, or something, that they were breeding, or they were trying to revive, or something from Hudson Bay or something?
Yeah, was that the wheat?
Was it wheat?
Maybe.
It might have been. I don't remember.
So, yeah, one of some of our collaborators have been interested in old sort of heirloom heritage grains, and that's sort of a tricky thing because a lot of times if you grow a heirloom grain out of place, it won't do very well.
Yeah.
So even if it has a really cool story, and often if it's been grown in the same area for hundreds of years, it will do well in that area, but then if you move it to a different climate, it won't do well. Similarly with modern varieties.
Like the one that didn't grow in eastern Washington, but grows in western.
Exactly.
Right.
With disease pressure, climate differences, even in western Washington, we have these little pocket microclimates, and one thing that does well in Skagit Valley won't necessarily do well, say, Island County. So that's why we try and do multi-location trials during the breeding process. But yeah, so we are interested in using those old lines as parents. So in the greenhouse right now, I actually have about 50 lines that I got from the National Small Grains Germplasm Collection. They're all colored barleys, purple, blue, and black. And they're accessions from all over the world. I'm not sure how old any of them are, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are 50 to 100 to a couple hundred years old. But I grew them out in the field, and they mostly died or got covered in disease. And that's the same with this heirloom wheat that you're mentioning. And so I definitely think heirlooms have a place. They often have very beautiful stories associated with them. And if they're grown in a place that they have continued to do well, that's great. But as I mentioned, the farmer is my number one priority.
Sure.
And so we actually, so Skagit Valley Malting did malt an old heirloom called Purple Egyptian. It's this beautiful purple seed that made fantastic malt and fantastic beer. And it came to them via, I think, Russia, via Egypt. But it performs very poorly for the farmers. One of the local farmers grew about an acre of it last year, I believe, and he ended up having to plow it under. It did really? So poorly. And so even though it has a really cool story and it has great flavor, again, if it doesn't work for the farmer, then it does grow quite well, I think, over in drier areas. but not in Western Washington.
Right.
So that's one that I'll use as a parent and try and get some of that color and flavor into a line that does do well here. And so as breeders, we can sort of collect those old heirlooms and try and maintain the story and maintain that specialness while also creating something that grows well.
So how much time does it take you to try and pull a color out of one?
Not a lot of time, actually. Mm-hmm. The color genes tend to be dominant, and so I have some, I think, F3 plots out that are currently segregating for color, so I'll pull the colored heads at the end and keep planting them, and so that will happen pretty easily, and I'm just really fascinated by the colors, and I think that will appeal to the same market that's interested in the craft beers if they can.
Well, because the color would add color to
exactly.
the malt.
It does. Yeah. It's not like a bright purple beer.
Sure.
But it is different.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah,
I appreciate
sure.
it.
It was fun. I love talking about barley.
Yeah, obviously.
All right. Thanks to Brigid for joining us today. That was a nice little history lesson. And we will be right back after a local music break from Julia Massey.
That was Montana Capri from Julia Massey. You can check her out at juliamassey.bandcamp.com. If you want to have your music played on Northwest Brew Talk, contact us today.
Okay, we're going to try another beer. This time we have Giant Pacific Octopus India Pale Ale from Narrows Brewing Company.
Narrows Brewing Company is located in Tacoma and open 7 days a week. They opened the doors to their tap room in July of 2013. They have 14 beers on tap and are open to those 21 and older. They do not serve food, but you are welcome to bring your own. And because they're located right on the water, they offer free docking to their customers.
Okay, now this one is golden, but it's a little lighter than the Hoppy Bitch. It's got a huge head on it and light citrus flavor. Scent.
Their website has the description of their Giant Pacific Octopus IPA, a color gold, ABV 7.2%, hop varieties, Magnum, Columbus, and Willamette, and a yeast strain, White Lab San Diego Super Yeast.
This one it's got definitely a different citrus flavor than the Hoppy Bitch.
Which is good to have some variety with your IPAs.
Yes, that's good. I do like my IPAs, and these are both different. So, yeah, nice. All righty, my friends, that brings us to the end of this episode of Northwest Brew Talk.
Make sure you tune in next week when we recap the Washington Brewers Festival.
All right, that's going to be a great time. The show is produced and edited by me with engineering help from Michelle Rizzo.
And if you want to contact us, you can email us at nwbrewtalk@gmail.com or give us a call at 541-595-TALK.
Until next time, I'm Mike Rizzo.
And I'm Michelle Rizzo.
Stay hopping, my friends.